Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar. My name is Ashley. I head up marketing and business development for Intermark. We are so glad that you were able to join us today, and we're super excited to discuss some key societal psychology trends that are having a really significant marketing impact today on business. So over the next hour, we're going to share some exciting research, insights that we've uncovered, and discuss how successful consumer marketing approaches are really evolving to leverage these trends like information overload, personalization, decision fatigue, authenticity, and more. So our two webinar speakers that you see here are from Intermark. We have Jake McKenzie and Dr. David Bridwell. Jake McKenzie is the CEO of Intermark and is considered a national expert on psychology-driven marketing. He has a background in marketing and has helped shape successful brands for companies like Toyota, Krispy Kreme, Progressive Insurance, and more. He is also an avid reader and outdoors enthusiast, in addition to be a father of four. He may have also had a birthday just yesterday. We also have Dr. David Bridwell, is a people scientist at Intermark by day and a folk musician by night. He is really interested in understanding how people are influenced and ultimately how they make decisions. So here at Intermark, he develops content and psychology-based insights regarding the ways individuals are influenced by media. So before we kick things off, I do need to set some ground rules. So first, please make sure that you mute yourself during the presentation. We don't want to interrupt David and Jake during their awesome conversation. Second, we would love to hear from you. So please make sure to send us your questions. You can actually use us in Zoom via the chat function. So the way this is going to work, we'll have 45 minutes of discussion, and then at the end, we'll have a 15-minute Q&A, where we'll actually answer your questions as they come in. And last but not least, we hope you have fun and would love to hear from you after the webinar. So send us your questions, your thoughts, and also if we can help your company unlock psychological insights for your brand in any way. So I will now jump off and turn it over to Jake and David.
Thanks so much, Ashley. Welcome, everybody. We're excited to be here. Wanted to kind of set the framework for what we're trying to accomplish today. And everybody is likely from a marketing background if you're on this webinar. And I often use this analogy of a moving train. And the way marketing often works is people take a picture of what's going on in society right now. They take a picture of a still train, and then you do strategy against it, and then you come up with tactics and implementation and things against that. The problem is the train isn't still, the train is continuously moving, but we forget that. There's this psychological phenomenon called temporal permanence, and basically it means that kind of we forget that other people are in motion and evolving at all times. And so really to understand marketing is to recognize that people are in motion in terms of their values and the impacts on the world around them. So you've got to actually run alongside the train in this metaphor to continue to observe those changes going on. And that's what we're going to do today. David, Dr. Bridwell and his team track dozens of ongoing trends in society. And these aren't the trends of, hey, everybody has a cell phone or computers are getting faster, but rather how those practical changes are impacting how people make decisions, because that's the area where marketing meets psychology and sociology and behavioral economics. So think about this as we're going to give you a view of that moving train. So we've set up a platform next to this moving train so you can see how people are evolving, if you will.
Yeah, because then you pay attention to the train and you try to run up and be at the same speed. And once you're at the same speed, that's when you understand it. And that's when you jump on board. So thanks for checking out our train today.
So a little bit about Intermark. We are an ad agency, but we have a very different focus. We have a behavioral science focus. And I use the word behavioral sciences because that's a very broad term that encompasses psychology and folks like David and the PhDs that we work with, but also sociology, which is kind of psychology applied to mass groups of people. And then, of course, behavioral economics, which are the decisions made at more of a micro level and how you can kind of nudge an individual towards behavior changes. The thrust of today are going to probably fall more in the sociology areas, but we're going to have psychology and behavioral economics implications for how we can affect individuals within that world. A little bit more about Intermark. We work with a lot of great brands all over the U.S., both large and small. The thing that brings them together is that behavioral science overview. And we are an ad agency, so we cover everything from ads to apps, as they say around the office. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that, but we will use some real-world marketing examples that reflect the trends that we're going to cover today. So even though we're tracking dozens of ongoing trends, David identified 5 major trends that we think are critical to incorporate into our marketing for 2020. This applies to all brands, whether it's you're selling something to consumers or other businesses. These are things that are affecting current decision making.
Yeah, really important things to keep in mind right now and pay attention to.
So quickly, the 5 trends are information overload, consumers becoming fans, a sense of time pressure, personalization is growing as a need within human influence. And then lastly, this overwhelming sense of nature that we have, and we're looking for simple solutions, trumping complex ones. Before we get into that, I want to cover kind of a clarity of one thing. As we talk about this, it creates the perception that all things about people are always undergoing change, and that's not true, right? In fact, most ways that we make decisions, think about the process in which humans make decisions, does not change. And that's something we want to start by covering, the things that don't change, so that we have the appropriate context of applying the things that do change. And I'll give some examples of that. For instance, everybody here has probably had an economics class at some point. Maybe it's high school or college or business school, and you probably saw something like this chart. It's the price-demand curve. And what it says simply is that the price of something drops, you'll sell more of it, right? And this is a core premise of microeconomic theory for most of the 120 years of its existence, that we're all super rational. What you may not know is economists about 10 years ago changed their tune. They gave the Nobel Prize in economics to a psychologist for illustrating that this wasn't true. Dr. Daniel Kahneman won the Nobel Prize originally for illustrating that we have not one decision-making system in the brain, but 2. The one on the right, Dr. Bridwell and his folks call it System 2. You can think about it as the slow system. And all it means is that you can be rational. You can weigh through the pros and cons of things. You just don't like to do it. And it's because it uses physical resources. And those resources we're going to see are already at the breaking limit of demand. The rest of the time we use this system that he described to us called System 1. That's an automated system that actually drives the vast majority of purchase decisions, both personal and business. And that system does not change. It's got a lot of systems within it, shortcuts, if you will, where the brain's looking for quick answers to complex questions. Is that a fair way of talking about it?
Right, yeah. And a lot of decisions that we make are like that. They're just very quick and not consciously planned. But we have this incredible ability to rationalize it after the fact. So even when we think we've thought about it, there's actually these sort of underlying unconscious factors that contribute, but we find the rationalization after the fact.
Yeah, that's an important driver here.
Yeah, so some of these, this is a main component of how we make decisions, just from a fundamental basis, and that's seeing a lot of other people make those same decisions and seeing what other people are doing. So that's a strong cue for us. And it's related to the concept of social proof, and it's been around for a long time, and one of the ways that we experience it is if we just see a bunch of people in line for the restaurant, then we assume it must be really popular, and that if we go there, then we can tell our friends about it, and we'll be the cool people that went to the new brunch place. But today, that process still exists, of course, in front of restaurants, but also looking at social media posts where we can see how many people like the restaurant page, and we can see how many people have reviewed the restaurant.
I think that's a good example of a piece of psychology that doesn't change. Social proof has always been there and will always continue to be there. It's a known shortcut. And some of the ways that we take in new information doesn't change and hasn't changed, right?
Yeah, it's super important to keep that in mind as how it's a powerful way that we get influenced in terms of how we operate in real life. And word of mouth is another really important way, really important thing to think about too, which is that most of the communications that we have about products and brands is just with people in real life at the water cooler and also in chat messages with them. That's where word of mouth sort of manifests more today. Like 80% of the communications online are through ways that we can't really measure very well, like through chat.
I think it's a really great point to pause on for a minute, because when we talk about word of mouth marketing in the marketing space, everybody immediately jumps into social media. What's going on social media? How can I affect it? And it's important to remember that that's only 20% or less than all word of mouth marketing. It's still happening person to person, right?
Yeah, and the real rich conversations that we have that we kind of want to be aware of to, pay attention to the movement of the train, those are happening where it's kind of really hard to measure, because that's where they're going, where they can have personal conversations. And so, you get your brother texting you, hey, have you seen The Joker? No, well, you should go see it. And that's kind of how a lot of people go out and see movies, is because they get a text message from a family member and things like that.
I think it's a good example of an overall process that's not changing. And another thing that you talk about that doesn't change is how we take in information or how we store things in memory.
Yeah. Basically, we're hardwired, we're predisposed to accept information in a certain way. And it's ways that we've been sharing information historically, just by talking to our family over dinner and sitting around at night and telling stories, basically. And so the really interesting thing about storytelling is that it basically packages important information in the guise of a story. So the story comes along and it's very entertaining, but the information comes along for the ride.
Sort of like The Boy Who Cried Wolf. Instead of telling my kids, hey, don't lie because people won't believe you, you tell them a story that then they can retell, and it's easy for them to remember, and they contain lessons or information.
Yeah, you package it in a story, and this is always going to be critical for marketing. Storytelling is never going to go away.
I love the example that you've got here.
Yeah, we saw this on the Super Bowl, and you can imagine if you have this insight that many people are afraid of sharing their data. That's this thing that's going on today. But how can you make people see that actually sharing your data and technology and data collection can actually enrich our lives? That's the information that you sort of need to package within the story.
Good opportunity for a narrative.
Yeah, and so we'll just go ahead. I'm sure you guys saw this Google Assistant commercial. We'll go ahead and show that right now.
Hey Google, show me photos of me and Loretta. Remember, Loretta hated my mustache. Remember, Loretta loved going to Alaska and scallops. Show me photos from our anniversary. Remember, she always snorted when she laughed. Play our favorite movie. Remember, I'm the luckiest man in the world. Come on, boy.
I've seen that ad a couple of dozen times, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. Still, maybe tear up a little bit watching it here again now.
That's cool. Yeah, it's very emotional. I think it was my favorite Super Bowl commercial.
Yeah, I think that's the real winner of the Super Bowl. No offense to our Kansas City Chief friends out there. I think it's a good example of narrative storytelling and how that doesn't change and the ways that we can shape memory and behavior.
Yeah.
But now we get to the thrust of today's talk about the things that do change and the trends that are ongoing. And so it's not that underlying process of how we make decisions, but rather the values that we hold and the way things are affecting us that force us to use System 1 more frequently or perhaps differently. And so you got some really exciting stuff here.
Yeah, so you got to keep your finger on the pulse. That's the thing. You have to be aware of what's appropriate for the TV and social media, as well as what culture is saying and what's culturally appropriate. and in the process of doing this. Something to keep in mind. So first trend is information overload. Now, I think we all can kind of relate to this notion that there's a ton of information out there, and we're basically bombarded with it. So in the 70s, we were exposed to 500 ads per day, they estimate. 2006, they estimated 5,000. And today, we're seeing up to 10,000 ads per day. And this is, while we're driving, the billboards, it's grocery store labels on the shelves, it's on the internet when we're going around and seeing all this information in front of us. And so that's a lot. That's not something that we're used to. And just to highlight how much information we see, we actually scroll through 300 feet of information on our phone. And that's the entire length of the Statue of Liberty.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's a ton of things that are popping up and coming up that we have to process. And each one of those, we have to sort of make a decision and engage with it in some way. And so that's a lot of work.
And the brain's not really geared for that. Like, we didn't evolve being bombarded by information. We're used to being able to take long periods of time to do stuff. So it's adapted in interesting ways, and for the most part of just filtering. So it filters things out. It ignores the vast majority of what it does see. And so at the end of the day, it's not enough to stick your product, your message in front of somebody. You got to get the brain to pay attention to it. And that's not as easy as it first sounds, right?
Yeah, we quickly learn how to ignore things. If it comes the way that we expect, it's easier for us to ignore it.
So the punchline of this is finding a unique way of standing out, using some psychological triggers to do so. So one way to do this is changing your business model so that your overall approach, you're probably familiar with T-Mobile, that blew up the whole industry by getting rid of subscription plans, which at that point they had trained us all that, hey, you get a new cell phone and we're going to sign on the dotted line for 2 more years.
That's a big commitment there, 2 years.
And now you can walk in and get a new phone and walk back out, and they've kind of tossed that on its head. And it was a great way of being disruptive, breaking with a cliche. Familiar with Airbnb, at the time we're staying in hotels or we're renting a VRBO, and Airbnb said, well, hey, what if we change that model so that you can stay at somewhere that felt like home? And in fact, was somebody's home, and a very different disruptive approach. It was a new saying that made us all pay attention and change our behavior.
Yeah.
This has major marketing implications as well, obviously, as we want to hear about today. And the big headline here is this concept called cognitive disruption. And cognitive disruption simply means your brain is ignoring nearly everything. How do I get it to stop and pay attention? So I'll use an example here. If I were to start a sentence by saying, I'm going to take my dog for your brain immediately reads ahead and fills in the blank with a walk. You probably pictured a dog, perhaps your dog, it may be your neighborhood or your park, and then your brain moves on to something else because it's overloaded with information. It's trying to think ahead. But if I were to change that sentence to, I'm going to take my dog for a beer, your brain immediately goes, kind of a record scratch moment. You stop. You're like, wait, what in the world is going on? Is that really a dog with a beer in front of it?
That sounds a lot more fun, actually.
Yeah, and then it raises lots of questions. Your brain's thinking, is that your beer, Jake? Or did you buy your dog a beer? Is that appropriate? I have lots of questions. And it forces you to stop and pay attention for a moment. And that's the primary challenge of what's going on. Yeah. And so the punchline here is you've got to break expected norms and cliches, which is the exact opposite of what happens in most marketing traditionally. We copy the things that are working as opposed to being disruptive. And some tremendous examples out there. For instance, example from a couple of years ago, Mohawk Flooring, largest carpet manufacturer in the world, launched a new product called Smart Strand. The upshot of it was you can't stand it. And as you guys know, carpeting is not a high interest category. People aren't walking around waiting to check out the new carpet ad, right? So they had to do something that was disruptive. So what they did is they carpeted the animal enclosures at several zoos and then turned the animals into social media stars and got some just unbelievably jaw-dropping results.
Coming up, a man known for his home makeovers was given an endangered black rhino a comfy place to, well, be a rhino. Stick around, we'll be back.
We're going to talk to Chip Wade and Sean Green. Chip, you're with HGTV. Sean, you're there with the Dallas Zoo. What are you two up to today?
What better way to test the resiliency of smart strand carpet than put it under the feet of the biggest, smelliest, and messiest animals around? And that's on a good day.
Right now, the carpet looks as if it's been in a war zone. He's pretty much destroyed it as much as he could with his normal bodily functions.
Now, the true test begins. Time to clean the carpet.
I have to admit, it looks like new.
I smell victory.
I think it's a good example of a disruptive idea, but as Dr. Bridwell points out regularly, it's also got a narrative structure to it, so it's easy to retell. It's shareable naturally, both for the salespeople in showrooms, but also for the public at large. Of, hey, did you see they put this rhino on carpet?
Yeah, I think if it can handle that rhino, then it should be pretty good with people's kids and pets.
Yeah. But it doesn't have to be just really big, complex ideas. It can simply be an execution of creative. Here's a couple of examples of outdoor ads that are highly disruptive. They break norms and cliches, is again the punchline here. Kind of in that same spirit of the Chick-fil-A ads when they begin putting a three-dimensional cow on an outdoor board. It makes you stop because it's unexpected to say, what's going on here? And both these outdoor pieces perform particularly well. And this can apply to literally any creative space. It's about breaking cliches and norms.
Yeah, toilet paper. I mean, you got to get pretty creative to get people's attention about that.
Yeah. And so the headline here, in a world full of noise where we're being bombarded, you've got to break cliches. You've got to break norms with your overall approach. Otherwise, the brain filters it out. And even heavier media weight has difficulty overcoming those things.
Yeah. And so now, next trend. Consumers become fans. And this is based on how we have this ability to really bond with each other and gather together over common ideas and beliefs. But the thing is, right now, in society, we feel isolated. So if you look at high schoolers and if they report if they feel left out or lonely, they're increasingly reporting that they feel left out and that they feel lonely. And you can see here on this graph that they're marking the iPhone release to implicate in some way that phones and social media might be related to that. And if you try to dig deeper about what this means, we also see that they're not hanging out with friends as much. So they're staying at home more and they're spending more time on the phone and social media, which creates this sort of impression that they're connected and they know what the people are doing and that they're communicating with people, but they're actually still feel isolated and lonely.
Yeah, it's kind of a great irony, right? Like we've never been more connected as a species before. We spend more time talking to people, but it's digital communications. As a result, we ironically feel more isolated than we've ever been. That sense of loneliness, is that the right?
Yeah, they feel lonely and isolated. And it's not just kids, it's not just high school students. This is an article from a teacher who asked their students to report which invention their kids wish didn't existed. And 4 out of 21 of the kids said they wish that their parents' phone didn't exist. So adults are on their phones too, and that impacts the isolation that their kids feel. And these kids are growing up. They're already getting into their early 20s and bringing these into the world and the way they experience the world. So this is super important to think about, and to think about ways that they can start to feel connected, and motivating that they can feel connected.
I resemble that, unfortunately, at times. I'm on my phone more than I want to be.
Come on, Jake, get off your phone. Is that what they do? They tug at your shoulder?
Yeah.
Get off your phone, Dad.
They'll call me out.
Yeah, that's good. So, but as a psychologist, this is really concerning, and because it leads to mental health issues and the feeling of isolation also leads to a feeling of pain that's sort of similar to actual physical pain. So if you look at the brain areas that respond to physical pain, they overlap with the brain areas that respond to social isolation.
Wow.
And that's because it's so important for us to be connected to people.
So this is having a major implication for how we're behaving as a species as well. Yeah. And the punchline is, because we feel isolated, we're increasingly looking to ways to break that isolation. And one common way that we're doing this is via sports. Sporting attendance, viewership, engagement are continuing to elevate or at higher and higher rates, and we're using technology for part of that engagement. So during a football game, as an example, Twitter use goes way up. Social media posts go way up, and text messages actually go way up as well, as we're trying to interact and be a part of this community, all sometimes while still sitting on our own couch, physically isolated. But it's also having profound implications for the values of those teams. We're seeing the monetary values of pro sports teams is going through the roof. And it's not just because of what's going on in the overall economy, it's because of the loyalty that's being created because of this sense of isolation. And so in general, people are looking for communities to be a part of and to join and to break that sense of isolation. And I'm sure you're wondering, okay, how do I deal with this as a marketer? How do I take advantage of that? Or what can I do? Well, brands can also provide a sense of community. I'll give you a few examples. Now, rather than thinking about the word community, I want you to think about it in terms of tribes, because all of the research that Dr. Bridwell and all the academics have done really centered around tribal psychology. And there's a set methodology that you can go through to help build your own community, your own tribe. And I won't go through all these individually. I'll give you some examples, like a creation story. I bet everybody listening to me today can tell the same story about how Apple was invented in a garage. You know, Steve Jobs and Wozniak were in the garage with that third guy that I can't remember his name because he sold his shares and gave up $100 billion. But we all know what happened. We all know there's a creed associated with great tribes as well. Again, you know, like Apple's got Think Different. And there's several other pieces, like a ritual, our friends at Corona. Nobody drinks a Corona beer without jamming a lime down into it, which is a curious thing about drink a beer.
Yeah, people aren't happy with Corona right now.
Yeah.
Sad.
Little cognitive dissonance going on with coronavirus.
They make associations. Even if they're unrelated, they associate the terminology Corona with the coronavirus.
And so there's a set methodology. We're familiar with how it works. I'll give you a famous example, kind of going back a little ways. Harleys over the last several decades have created a phenomenal tribe kind of following this same methodology. You know, they've got a creed. If I have to explain, you wouldn't understand. They've got icons, and several of these, in fact, the leather motorcycle jacket, the saddlebags on the bike, even the sound of the muffler on a Harley, which ironically originally was a defect that they, rather than fix, just embraced and said, no, this is part of our brand, it's part of our iconography. And they developed rituals around it as well. Like I'm sure you have noticed, as two Harley riders pass each other, they drop two fingers off to the side. And that's a simple way of communicating to somebody you don't know, we're a member of the same tribe, and you feel that bonding moment. It lowers that sense of isolation.
You ever think they make a mistake and they say hi to somebody who's not driving a Harley, and then they just feel like it's really bad?
I'm sure
really awkward.
It still makes you feel like you're trying to connect, which is never bad. It's like waving to somebody that was waving to the person behind you.
Yeah, it's awkward.
And then you've got your pagans, the folks that are not in your tribe, and you got to well define those. And sport teams, that's easy. For Harley, it's the rest of us. Hey, you in the minivan, how long you in for?
Now, do you have a Harley, Jake?
No, I'm the minivan guy, man. I got 4 little kids. But I don't get offended by that. Rather, it makes me want to be a part of that tribe, once I get past that stage. And that's the power of tribal psychology, is it makes you want to be a sense of that community to help overcome that sense of isolation that we're feeling. Yeah. Now, I'm sure you're looking at this and thinking, oh my goodness, Harley, man, they're big time. They've been doing this for decades. How can I create a tribe? Well, the reality is even smaller brands can build that same sort of tribal psychology to take advantage of it and build loyalty and passion. An example is a chain of dessert places. Rita's Italian Ice. They're headquartered out of Philadelphia and heavy in the Northeast, particularly Pittsburgh, New Jersey, Baltimore area. And they've done work to try to begin building their own tribe. So their creed is suns out, tongues out. And it has to do with when you eat Italian Ice, it colors your tongue. So if you have cherry flavored Italian Ice, your tongue's going to be red. If you have the sour apple, it may be green. So rather than call it a defect, they call it a feature and embraced it. So suns out, tongues out. If it's warm weather, Rita's, and you can show it by sticking your tongue out. They develop rituals around their brand as well. So first day of spring, they give away small cups of free ice. And people have responded in droves. Hundreds and thousands of people line up to get their free cup of Italian Ice on March 19th of this year. Which is interesting, David, because March 19th in Pennsylvania is not warm yet. You know,
yeah.
Feet of snow may still be on the ground, yet that will not deter this tribe from getting together.
Yeah, I've seen their social media posts. They're like holding umbrellas and it's raining and snowing. And
yeah, the effects of this have been really profound. Like you're having people hold Rita's themed weddings. We had some folks submit photos of newborn themed photo shoots that were Rita's themed, rather. Halloween costumes are super popular in the area. There was one family that buys their own tubs of ice, has built their own costumes, and within their neighborhood on first day of spring, do their own tastings. Can you imagine that level of fan passion? They love it so much that they're actively out engaging in that ritualistic behavior that Rita's helped define. That's tremendous.
Yeah, I think you could get away with that, Jake. You guys could have a Rita's party.
Yeah, I would love to, man. I love some Ritas.
So next up, trend 3, the time is now. Now, I don't know if you guys perceive this, the amount of urgency. This is what I perceive in my life, probably because I'm embedded in this social media landscape as well. But everything feels like it's urgent. And the ironic thing is that studies show we're actually working less hours today than we were in the past. So this graph goes out really long, from the last 100 years and more. But you could see that right now in the 2000s, we're working less hours than we were previously, even though we feel this strong sense of urgency. So we have more time now to do unrelated things. We have more time to sleep today compared to the past. And we're spending more time watching TV and using social media today than we were in the past. Yet we still feel like everything is very urgent and that we don't have enough time.
You know, I feel that. Like I know rationally I'm working less, and I see the charts. I know I rationally probably have more free time, but I feel busier, and you get that sense of stress from it.
Yeah. And where is this coming from? A lot of it is this feeling that we can't juggle between, 2/3 of it is because we feel like we can't juggle between managing our work situation and our social relationships and all these factors.
So 2/3 of all of our stress is coming from this feeling that we don't have enough time, which rationally isn't the case. That's nuts.
Yeah, and probably one of the reasons why is because there's so much information out there today. So 90% of the world's data was created in the past 2 years, according to 2017. So looking today, like we're increasingly creating more and more data and building the infrastructure. And we have this need to basically try to be aware of everything that's going on and feel like we have to see every single post on our social media. And that's probably contributing to this sense of urgency that we feel. And we're also, because of that, we're switching between tasks and more than we had before. So they estimate 300 times per day that we're switching between different tasks. And so we need to really consider this as a value, as a thing to consider about the potential customers.
So just information overload. I'm packet switching, going between things, and as a result, I feel this time pressure.
Yeah.
And that's really changing human behavior in fundamental ways. And in essence, what it's creating is this sense that we need to buy time, or more specifically, that we are willing to buy time. You know, some examples that we're all super familiar with: Amazon and their 2-day guaranteed delivery. What's interesting is you look at some of the data, it's creating some interesting phenomenon. People are willing to pay substantially more on Amazon. It's no longer the low price leader that it once was, in order to get the 2-day delivery. Even when we know it's going to be less expensive somewhere else, or even when it's going to be delivered in that same sense of time, because we're willing to value that delivery. Food delivery is going through the roof, and these are newfound sales. We now have grocery delivery that is not just a thing, but is a super common thing, as people are willing to pay more, in essence, to buy free time that we didn't have before. And this isn't just a business model phenomenon, but rather a marketing phenomenon as well. A couple of examples recently that we've been talking about. Great Clips has changed their marketing focus to their app. And in the app, you can check in ahead of time, and they will alert you when your stylist is about to be ready, so that you can just show up and sit down as soon as you walk in the door rather than waiting. And the reality is, most people weren't waiting very long, 10, 15 minutes tops, but it's the perception of time savings that becomes a driver for human behavior. Little Caesars has put the bulk of their marketing focus into, again, a time-saving claim. You know, hey, we have these pizzas that are hot and ready. If you want a cheese pizza or a pepperoni pizza or sometimes even a specialty pizza, just show up and grab it. And again, the real time savings here is small, because, you know, what's it take for them to custom create a pizza? 7-8 minutes tops if I call ahead. But it's that perceptual piece of, you're saving me a few minutes, therefore I'm willing to show up because I don't have to do this additional task. And that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, and it's really important to communicate this to people. And so that's where marketing really comes in. For example, if you check out this is a little 5-second ad where, if you imagine, how can we convey how quick and efficient we are? This Shake Shack ad, it's pretty direct and gets right to the point of saying, look, we can get you your lunch right there at your office. It's super easy. And it only took them 5 seconds to package that information.
You know, and a couple of things I noticed about this. One is it's the desk. I'm still sitting at my desk. I'm getting lunch delivered so that I can work more. It's that time-saving claim. And the product in it is super small. It's only almost a reference to what the specific product is. And the main focus is on that time-saving component, which is really powerful. Mm-hmm. We're seeing this in some industries that are unexpected as well. The healthcare industry is a place where people feel like they are wasting a lot of time, or it's a very time-intensive resource. So now you're beginning to see practices put forth, hey, these are our positions and when they're available, so you can take an active role in that scheduling. There's a children's hospital that will allow you to check in online so that you can find out when to show up with your child. Now, as a parent, I look at this and think, holy cow, man, I got to take my kid to the children's hospital. We're just going, right? But the reality is that time pressure may change human behavior and create preference, even in places that it seems nonsensical. And we're also seeing a proliferation of apps where the perception is that you can engage earlier than you would have, in this case in the medical space, where you can take pictures of some of your issues and have them texted or posted directly to your physician, so that when you get there, the belief is it will save you some time. Now, will it really? Maybe, maybe not. That's not the point. This is a marketing perception that it's creating, and that is changing human behavior. It's our willingness to buy more time.
Right. So trend number 4, personalization drives profits. Now, right now, we really value self-expression. And so that's something that we increasingly value, and we use social media to do that. And so if you actually look, you can actually quantify, and it turns out there's 2 dimensions that we generally have across cultures. And it's self-expression is one of those important dimensions. So here on the bottom, you've got survival versus self-expression. And going out on the right are the countries that really value it. And these are in the United States and other English-speaking countries and related They really value self-expression, and so they want to find ways where they can get out and have a need for personalization.
There are some famous examples of this. Coca-Cola several years ago launched Coke with our names on them. And man, it changed human behavior in a radical way. First time Coke sales are up double digits. I saw people crawling in coolers looking for the name on a Coke bottle. And David, I don't know about you, but people were bringing me Cokes merely because it had my name on it rather than because I'd done something for them. It was fascinating times.
I think they knew you were going to like it, Jake.
I did. Yeah. Who doesn't love a good Coke? We're seeing that concept of personalization really take off in other spaces. You can personalize your bank card as a sense of self-expression. Mm-hmm. You know, and down here in Alabama, roll tide, right?
That's what they say down here.
You can also personalize your baby lotion and put the kid's name on it. People are willing to pay more for it. You can personalize your beer consumption and celebrate your favorite sports team. So a lot of different flavors of how we can use this sense of personalization. And it's having a profound effect. You know, for instance, we built this vehicle configurator for Toyota. And in essence, you can go in and kind of build your own Toyota is the punchline of it. And what we found is that leads generated from this configurator were far and away the highest closing leads generated by anything Toyota could do. Once they get you to build a car, it's yours. And here's an interesting piece. You rarely got that specific car. They would usually try to get you to buy something that was already on the lot that was similar to this car, but it wouldn't be it exactly. And instead of going through that extra step of you can custom order the car, people didn't do that. They would rather buy something that was close to it, kind of tying back to that time trend before. Man, now you can personalize everything. Nike allows you to personalize shoes, and people are not only preferring this or having preference for this, but they're also willing to pay more for it, which is pretty notable. So even if it's the exact same shoe that I can pick up at the store, I'm willing to pay more for it if I have that sense of personalization. And you can personalize everything from shoes to M&Ms.
You can even let people personalize the Rice Krispie Treats wrappers. And one component of personalization is segmentation. And we think about that a lot. And we don't have time to really dive deep into what it means, but we'd love to talk to you about that more.
But it works.
But millennials prefer it. Personalized messages. It increases brand loyalty. And it makes them more psychologically connected to ads.
That's a powerful trend that we've seen in lots of places. I know everybody on this webinar is familiar with Netflix and how addictive it is. And it's addictive in part because they pioneered an AI methodology to build segmentation models that are highly personalized. So it's like, hey, you like this show? You're going to love these shows. And as a result, we stick around and we have preference for it, even when the specific content that we're looking for may not be available on that platform. It's a really powerful mechanism that's growing tremendously, particularly among millennials.
Yeah, and trend 5, finally, we got keep it simple, stupid.
And I know this is a term I've been hearing my entire life, but this concept is actually accelerating, right?
Yeah, it's something that's increasingly important. So it's kind of always existed, but it's really important right now because we feel a lot of stress in our lives. And we have to make so many decisions throughout the day. And it turns out that we think that making more decisions is better for us because it gives us more options. But it turns out that there can be such a thing as too many options. So this study showed that if you gave 24 options for jams or 6 different options for jams, people actually bought more jams when they had 6 options. And they didn't get overwhelmed with the amount of options. So more isn't always better.
We're seeing this in business models. You know, it used to be I had dinner with my wife and wanted a ride home because we had a bottle of wine. I had to call a cab and all the steps that took. I had to find the number, figure out the address of the restaurant I was sitting at, convey where I was going, and then go stand on the street corner hoping that it didn't drive me by or pick up somebody else. And Uber turned that on its head, and it removed all decision making from it. It knows where you are, where you're going. You don't have to talk to the driver at all or interact or make any decisions. It just all happens on your behalf. It's fundamentally just easier. And they have dominated the yellow cab space. We've seen other businesses like Dollar Shave Club do great business in part because of simplifying. Now, certainly they had a price component to this as well, but the automated piece, so you're going to need razors every month, so we're going to drop it at your house. So you don't have to get to the end of your razor pack and remember, oh, I have to add this to my shopping list and remember to get it at Kroger next time I'm there. It just happened without you thinking about it, and that has really changed human behavior. And in the marketing space, anything we can do to reduce cognitive friction. One of my favorite examples is the online insurance space. Nobody likes applying for insurance because it perceptually takes a lot of time. Well, Progressive and Geico and some of the leaders in the space have reduced that cognitive load. So you can go in and put a little information about yourself, like, hey, here's my name and my home address, and boom, they're like, oh, is this who you're married to? And here's information about your house and your vehicle, because we're pulling all that from public records.
You got your wife's age on there, Jake.
I know, I realized that a moment
Nice
ago.
job.
She's going to kill me, so please no one tell her that I put her age up there. Love you, dear.
So we're actually making products simpler. We have a phone that is just a phone, right? We see the advantage of that nowadays. And a part of that is recognizing what people bond with and what people want, which maximizes their customer experience. And again, we've seen that increases their loyalty and it increases their retention.
So because of this demand we're constantly under, we've got to reduce decision making, make things simpler, help people through the process that it happens quicker and with less cognitive load, I think was the term you like to use, right? So, quick recap. A lot of things are impacting us. A lot of the same drivers that are creating these psychological and sociological trends, information overload, sense of isolation that's driving us to find communities with brands, a sense of time pressure, the desire for increased personalization in our marketing as well as our products, and that cognitive load, which means that we need to keep things simpler. Now, there are dozens and dozens of other trends that you guys are tracking in your department. These are the ones that we believe are the most pertinent for 2020 that we've got to begin incorporating into our marketing if we want to keep up with where that train is today. So thanks. We're going to go into question and answer phase. If you like some of this content, you want to see more of it, of course, go to our website. There's blogs, podcasts, videos, in just about every flavor of social media, including our YouTube channel, lots of additional content you can go consume. And if you have questions that we don't get to today or you'd like to just ask us offline, here's my direct contact information. I love talking about this stuff. If you would like some more time than just email Ashley Boyd, whom you heard from earlier. Ashley will schedule some time with you or your company, and we can spend 15 minutes talking through some of these things and the implications they have. So let's get to some of the questions you guys have submitted so we can make this more fruitful for you. So one of the ones that came in early was, is there an empirical formula for standing out? And I think the answer is yes. It's not the same for all industries, but here's how it fundamentally functions. In the creative step of the process, what you do is begin defining the cliches and the norms within your industry. And I think you know what those are. Like you look at banking ads, and most banking ads look awful similar. So begin writing out what those cliches are, and then be intentional about not doing them. And that's an oversimplified way of looking at it, but breaking cliches and norms within your space is a process that you can go through about being intentional to do that. Now, you still need to define your audience. You still need to understand what they're undergoing psychologically at that time, where the train is at that moment, and appeal to that individual in a unique way. But the headline here, if you get nothing else, is break the cliches, break the norms, otherwise the brain filters them out and doesn't pay attention to it.
And because we're big on psychology here, psychologists are really good at detecting and questioning, why do we do this as a society? Why do we do this? The things that sort of typically people overlook. So that's an important tool to try to identify where we can go with that.
So good. Next question. What difference do you see in the desire for personalization with different age groups? Outstanding question. So let me start with this, as David will remind us all. There is a desire for some level of personalization called the endowment effect, yeah? Mm-hmm. And the endowment effect basically says, what is mine is more valuable than what is yours. So we all feel this desire for personalization, but one of the things we saw is that particularly among millennials and the younger generation, they have a desire for personalization that exceeds those of us like me that are getting a little gray hair in our hair. And so if you're picking a target market where you've got to do some personalization, it's in that space. Although I think you guys would say you're going to see great effects for it across any age and sub-demo. But the oldest generation expects it the least, and the young generation, I think, just expects it. That it's almost a norm of what they're desiring.
They've been exposed to it because they consume so much social media, and of course social media advertising is where personalization can really come in. And another question, just to kind of dive in on that, is how far you can go on customization, which is that sometimes you could go too far in terms of personalizing, so you don't want to be creepy, and you have to understand what the different age segments are sensitive to.
That's a great suggestion. So step one is start with segmentation, define different subgroups, and be willing to have different creative messaging against those subgroups. You can do this super cost efficiently. It can still serve that same creative concept. Geico's one that everybody's familiar with. You notice that they've got a half dozen different campaigns going on at a moment. They're segmenting. They have that same message, but it still has to do with the same brand. Save 15% in 15 minutes, and you're still getting that across to everybody. So you start there. Then if you can increase your personalization across a product set, personalize your product delivery, and then personalize the messaging. If you're going to do direct communication, use people's names, use the data that you've already got, and you can use AI to automate this process so that you increase the personalization level of that communication. Like, hey, I realize you're a business owner, or hey, I realize you're a dad. Any level of personalization will increase that response rates that consumers have. And big data and AI is making this a lot easier, particularly at that CRM level of communication, that personalized level of communication, and it's becoming increasingly important. It's an outstanding question. So next big question, what is the best advice you can give to businesses for incorporating psych in marketing? Outstanding question. To us, it seems fairly obvious that this ought to be done at every level, because understanding how people make decisions is crucial. So where we inject it into the marketing is at the briefing phase. Who is it that we're talking to, and where are they on the train right now? What are they thinking, and what are those drivers influencing them? Then we work with folks like David and his team to identify very specific psychological drivers that are going to resonate with people. You saw some examples today. We're feeling that time pressure. We're feeling isolated, and as a result, we respond best to personalization. So increasing levels of personalization may find its way into the brief that informs the creative, so that your creative outcome should be working off of psychological drivers. So put it in there. Everybody can do that piece of it. If you really want to get advanced about it, take the psychology and bake it into the creative as well. And this requires quite a bit more training and education for your creative teams, because everything within a creative message has an effect. The colors that you use, the accent of the spokesperson that you use, the language that you use has a major effect. Where it is on the page has a major effect. Every single component can increase the effect of its use, but you got to put it in at the brief level, at that strategy level, so that you're talking to people. And one thing I've noticed over the years, I hear a lot is, like millennials aren't brand loyal, right? I think we've all heard that concept. Mm-hmm. And what you're hearing is somebody took a photo of a train 15 years ago and started marketing. And now they're surprised that today's youth aren't responding the same as they were 15 years ago. It's like, well, of course not. The train kept moving. And that's what they're saying is people don't respond to the same drivers that we had 15 years ago. They're responding to a different set of psychological drivers. Not that psychology fundamentally is different or that you can't affect them. It's just different messaging that's going to resonate with them. I think that's a good way of thinking about it.
Another thing is that brand loyalty looks different. So it's always going to be there, but in today's day of media and social media, it might not look the way that we expect it to look.
So another question came in. What type of segmentation do we use? Behavioral, psychographic, or is there a proprietary model? So one size does not fit everybody, and there are different budget levels. Everybody can get their hands on, and we can help you with this, taking a third-party segmentation model. There's a lot of existing research you can apply in this space, and that is dramatically more effective than not segmenting at all. If you have the time and specifically the data, we can take it up a level. So what we'll do is we'll come in and take your data and we'll apply an AI methodology to it to do your own segmentation off your own customer set. And what we find is we get richer data off of that. that sometimes differs in substantial ways from the third-party data that everybody's using. So if you have the time and the resources, that's a great way to go to increase that level of segmentation. Rarely do you have a proprietary model that only applies to you, but your customers may behave in slightly different ways than customers elsewhere. People shopping in Birmingham, Alabama are going to be very different than the customers shopping in Los Angeles, California. And recognizing that at a segmentation level is critical. Messages resonate differently, outbound psychological triggers apply differently.
I mean, also going beyond age, going beyond gender and where they live, but what are they interested in? That's a really key dimension that you can start looking into.
And overlaying the psychographics of that is where the power really becomes profound. Another good question we got is, how does a brand get started with digital strategy today? So let's start with this. You need to be leading with digital when you have a marketing strategy. If you're leading with anything else but digital, you've got your ROI curve inverted. So let's lead with digital. Part of the profound power of digital is the segmentation that it allows us. We can hyper-target people both geographically, do they live around the store that you're selling at, or your university, or your bank branch. But you can also profile them psychographically, like I'm wanting to talk to moms who have 2 kids who are irritated with their bank, and use that level of segmentation to serve them personalized ads. They don't need to be one-to-one level of personalization. They need to be personalized on a segmentation level. So that would be a great place to start. And even above that, I'm sure everybody is doing search marketing. Search marketing is an unbelievable place to aggregate a market because people are self-selecting, and they're self-selecting by going to Google and typing in, well, what's the best ice cream shop near me? Well, that's letting you know where I am physically as well as what I'm shopping for. So it's a perfect time to intervene messaging-wise. And Google's make it really appealing when you only pay for outcomes. So start with those 2 areas from a digital marketing strategy, and I think you'll see some profound results. As you get deeper, you'll realize that a lot of traditional methods still have unbelievable power, great place to reach aggregation points. Another question is, do you find that the decision trees questions are more acceptable to consumers? Oh, great question. So a decision tree, are they more acceptable to consumers? And the short answer is yes. This goes back to that concept of cognitive load. If you can simply reduce the number of questions that we're asking consumers to make, the number of choices that we're asking them to make, you'll see better outcomes. And a decision tree works in that same mode. Like, okay, if you answered no to this, I don't need to bother asking you the following questions. But yet a lot of online applications, as an example, are not built with that in mind. They're built by a software engineer. And remember, all software engineers can be super smart, but they don't think in terms of how can I reduce cognitive load? And so they need some help in that space of building decision trees, asking, do I really need to even have this question on the screen? Because even if you don't want somebody to answer the question, they don't have to answer the question, merely having it on screen reduces the chance that they will bail out entirely from the overall process, which is something you desperately do not want to have. So yes, decision trees, yes, you need to give a lot of thought to cognitive load and what's on the screen. All right, we'll do one more question. And what is the ROI of psychological marketing? Great question. There's not one number in mind. What we have found is that people that apply psychologically driven marketing always achieve dramatically better results than those that do not. And it's because it is a science-driven approach. We know more of what the outcomes are going to be than if we're just shooting from the hip and going, hey, I've got a good idea. And the reason is we've got 120 years of existing academic research in psychology and sociology and now behavioral economics in the last 10 years that tells us what the outcome is going to be. And so if you'll apply that research, it's easier to predict what's going to happen when you apply this in this space. Well, guys, I have had a tremendous amount of fun. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure you have some more questions. Like I said, feel free to email me directly. Email Ashley. We've been recording this. We're going to post it to our website. And if you are logged on today, we'll send you an email with an update. We will continue doing some of these on different psychology-driven marketing topics and behavioral science marketing topics over each quarter. So looking forward to seeing you next time around. In the time being, thanks for joining us.
All right. Thanks, everybody.